911 emergency emergency.
Yeah, I just observed a carjacking.
And how long ago did this happen?
This just happened 10 seconds ago. We just walked by.
Oh, okay.
And it was an older lady.
Someone just stole a lady's car, and she got caught in the wheel well, and the car drove off super fast. She was stuck to the car.
Where's the lady right now?
She was in the car, not like stuck in the car, like in the wheel well being drove.
A lady was just dragged up the street, and she's not responding. She's breathing, but she's not physically responding, like unable to talk. She's got breast burns all over her. She was literally dragged almost a block and a half. I think that's speeding. Right here.
Oh my God! Her arm came off? Oh my God! Ellie got carjacked and she lost her arm.
What kind of clothing does she have on?
She has on a purple shirt, and right now she has my gray sweatshirt over her because all her clothes was ripped off. She had black pants. All we saw was a lady being dragged, and we just started following the car. Everybody was trying to get to the car to get them to let her loose.
I need you to take a deep breath and tell me what happened. What's going on?
I saw a lady being dragged and pulled with a car pulling her. They knew they were dragging her. There's another car trying to stop her, and it kept on going.
First and foremost, I'd like to give a thank you to my channel members, Toya, Byron, and Danielle. Thank you so much for your loyalty to my channel. And if you're not a part of my membership, make sure you sign up. There's some extended, uncensored videos on there. Everything that the general public sees, you get to see first, but with uncensored and extended content. So let's jump right into today's story. Today, familia, we're headed south to the state of Louisiana, rich in culture, the birthplace of jazz, personally one of my favorite genres of music, also where most people would prefer to eat their gumbo, and of course, the home of Mardi Gras. And from what I hear, some of the most welcoming and friendliest people hail from the Pelican State. One of those people being who our story is about today. Let's get into a brief background of a Louisianian, Mrs. Linda Josephine FRICKEY. Linda, born November 22nd, 1948, grew up in West Wego, Louisiana, located in Jefferson Parish. She comes from a pretty large family with both her parents and 6 siblings. She grew up knowing how to speak Cajun French, a variety of French spoken in South Louisiana, originated in the language spoken by the French and Acadian people that settled in Louisiana from its early period of European colonization. According to my research, West Wego is a suburban community of New Orleans in the greater NOLA metropolitan area and lies along the west bank of the Mississippi River. Now, if any of my subscribers are from Louisiana or familiar with the city of West Wego and want to add a fun fact or two in the comments, feel free to do so below. In the late 80s, she married her husband Ricky FRICKEY, and they went on to have 2 children of their own. She had 4 grandchildren and a gang of nieces and nephews. Although she was a licensed cosmetologist, she really only did makeup on her friends and family. However, she did work as an agent for Security Plan Life Insurance and went on to work for them for a whole 28 years. She was so dedicated to her job that the families she helped, she ended up being really good friends with. And Linda was a social butterfly in her area anyway. Everywhere she went, she knew someone, and if they weren't friends already, she was making new friends. And one of her favorite things to do was to shop till she dropped, especially with her granddaughter Prudence. And she just really loved being with her family. She and her sisters would meet consistently for what they called the Hen Party, cute name. Now, I just mentioned how Linda was working for the insurance company for basically a whole lifetime. However, she was looking forward to retiring from it just last year, November of 2022 to be exact. Until then, she still got up regularly to clock in, tend to her clients, and clock out. But unfortunately, Linda would never get the chance to see that retirement date. You see, it was a Monday afternoon, approximately 1:30 p.m. on March 21st, 2022. Linda was leaving work located in a New Orleans mid-city neighborhood as she would any other day. She walked to her vehicle, a 2021 gray Nissan Kicks, and was placing some things into her car and sat for a brief moment before getting ready to head home. However, little did she know, there were 4 teenagers who were zeroed in on her with a heinous plot. The teens, John Honor, who was 17 at the time, now 18, Brenia Baker, who was also 17, Lenira Theophile, 16, and Markel Curtis, also 16. And here on your screen, you can see the teenagers like sharks circling and plotting on this vehicle, coming towards it from different angles, and then eventually snatching the car doors open and forcing themselves into her car while violently snatching Linda out of the car. John opened the driver's door and sprayed mace in her face, while she also got her face stomped in as a result of her begging the teens to just please stop what they were doing. But what's so fucked up about this is Linda didn't get a chance to really exit the vehicle. You see, as the teens got into the vehicle with John as the driver, he took off speeding, and as he sped off, Linda took off with them too, but in the most vicious way. You see, Linda's arm had gotten stuck in the seatbelt, so as John was driving, Linda's whole body got dragged with the vehicle. Her clothes got ripped off, leaving her naked. Her body was skinned, and her arm was ripped off in the process, completely detached from her body, ultimately killing Linda right there at the scene. Later, her official cause of death was found to be a result of blunt force injuries. A witness stated they heard blood-curdling screams as the vehicle went flying down the street, and nearby resident Todd Eckernick said he saw the speeding car dragging the woman by the seatbelt. She was dragged for almost an entire block on North Scott Street. Todd said, quote, "The door had been closed on the seatbelt and she was stuck in it. I got out of my vehicle screaming, 'Please stop.' Other neighbors were also screaming," end quote. Another neighbor named Leanne Mascar said, quote, "She was screaming and she was screaming to please let her go, and then they slowed down and opened the door to kick her out. As soon as I saw her, I screamed. I just started running for her. I thought if I could somehow, I don't know what I could do, but I thought if I could dislodge her from this car. When I looked down, her body was already there, and her arm it's just not something you expect to see. She was laying there naked, and I thought the indignity she just suffered, it was already too much," end quote. Leanne's husband, Mark Mascar, who sat with Linda until the ambulance got there, said, quote, "Just to sit beside a woman who's a mother or grandmother and watch her fade away. As my wife said, we were praying. I was telling her to hang in there because every time I heard a siren, I was hoping and praying it was the ambulance. I kept telling her to hang in there, breathing. Her eyes were moving. I've never seen something so horrific," end quote. Police recovered Linda's car about 13 blocks away from where it was originally parked. Tim Levy of the Greater Mid-City Business Association told WWL-TV that people who lived in the area were all happy and things were pretty positive up until this happened, and that everyone felt like they needed to buy guns for their protection at that point. Not long after the teens committed this horrific crime, They were all arrested and were charged with second-degree murder, according to the New Orleans Police Superintendent Sean Ferguson when he spoke at a news conference that following Tuesday, March 22, 2022. Now, the parents of a couple of the teenagers involved reached out to police as soon as they heard about what happened when police released pictures of the teenagers, asking for help identifying them. The parents of one of the girls contacted police and turned their daughter in, and the parents of John also turned him in. Then a search warrant was issued for one of the girls who hadn't been turned in. She was arrested at home, and the other young lady turned herself in on Tuesday afternoon, according to Sean Ferguson. He said, quote, "I want to commend them for doing the right thing. We absolutely need more parenting like that," end quote. A few days after Linda's untimely death, friends and family gathered around to remember Linda and spoke to how kind of a person she was and how cowardly the teenagers were for targeting an elderly woman. They said they hoped to have been able to start a foundation in Linda's name to pursue higher penalties for crimes against elderly people. Her family requested that the second-degree murder charges be upgraded to first degree and for the teens to be tried as adults. Sean Ferguson said he also requested the same from District Attorney Jason Williams. Several days after this, on Monday, March 28th, 2022 at 11 a.m., a funeral mass for Linda was held in the chapel of West Side Leeds Eaton Funeral Home. 5 months went by, and on Friday, August 12th, 2022, the 4 teenagers who viciously robbed and murdered Linda made an appearance in the Orleans criminal court for a bond hearing. It was 9 a.m. when half the courtroom was occupied by the relatives of the 4 teenagers and their attorneys. The attorneys made a request to the judge, Judge Kimya Holmes, that the bond for the criminals be reduced down to a mere $50,000. However, Judge Kimya Holmes, who said this was the most serious case she'd ever seen, and decided that each of the teenagers would continue to be held on a $1 million bond. The teenagers weren't the only ones with supporters in the courtroom. Across from the criminals' relatives sat 20 of Linda's family members, and they were all wearing purple bracelets with butterflies on them in honor of Linda because her favorite color was purple and she loved butterflies. They told a journalist at the courthouse how happy they were when the judge stood on business for the $1 million bond. One of Linda's sisters said, quote, "I would have jumped up for joy if I could have. She needed to keep that bond where it was. She really did. We want all of these crimes to pay. These young adults be charged as adults. We want future children to realize that you can be charged as an adult." After this, the next court date wasn't scheduled until the following year, April 3rd, 2023, where it was definitive that the teens would be tried as adults. On the 1-year remembrance of Linda's death, March 21st, 2023, Linda's family held a memorial in honor of Linda at her gravesite at Restlawn Park Cemetery and Mausoleum in Avondale. Even down to the time of her murder, Linda's family was outside at 1:30 in the afternoon with balloons, gathered around wearing hints of purple and Justice for Linda t-shirts, supporting each other in their time of grief. And right around this time is when it was revealed that one of the teens, Lenivra Theophile, was deemed incompetent for trial at that time. Apparently, she had been suffering with severe depression and would be sent to stay in a mental health facility for 60 days before being reevaluated in May. The other teenagers involved were scheduled for their April 3rd trial date. The news of Lenivra not having to show up to the trial in April was very upsetting for Linda's family, and rightfully so. Her sister, Jenny Lynn FRICKEY, said, quote, "Is she depressed? Probably so, but are we depressed? Definitely. You know you did this. You chose this. We're depressed for a different reason than she's depressed, and we're not considering ourselves incompetent. We're competent. We're coming to court. We want justice." End quote.
A year ago today, 73-year-old Linda FRICKEY died after being violently carjacked in Mid-City. I'm Katie Moore.
And I'm Cherise Gibson. FRICKEY was dragged from her car for a city block and her arm was severed during that incident. Now 4 teenagers were arrested and are being tried as adults.
Today, the family tells Lily Cummings that their fight for justice is far from over in this case. Lily, you're joining us now. This had to be an emotional day.
It was definitely a moving day for sure, and they met around 1 p.m. and I want to mention that time specifically because that was around the time that a year ago today, Linda FRICKEY was sitting in her car. Now, a lot has changed for the family in the last year, but FRICKEY's memory lives on. Family, friends, and former co-workers of Linda FRICKEY gathered at her grave in Avondale.
It was a beautiful day, just like today. That's why Linda was sitting in her car. Just right down to the minute. These are the horrifying minutes.
1 year ago, their lives changed forever.
Yeah, our fight is for Linda. We want justice for our family member. But it's not just Linda. We want this for all elderly people, for all the victims of this juvenile crime. It's like it's a trend.
The family is pushing for accountability of kids who are truant from school and their parents, as well as an overhaul of the juvenile criminal justice system. FRICKEY's case continues to move through court. This week, we learned one of the 4 teenagers accused of carjacking and killing FRICKEY was deemed incompetent for trial. 16-year-old Lenira Theophile will spend 60 days in a mental health facility before being reevaluated.
We're depressed for a different reason than she's depressed, and we're not considering ourselves incompetent. We're competent. We're coming to court. We want justice.
The family says they're thankful for the support they've received from people across the nation. That support reaching FRICKEY in heaven.
Yesterday, when we came out to the graveyard, Kathy's daughter found a purple butterfly wing. Linda loved purple and she loved butterflies. That was a sign that she knew we were coming to give her support for today.
Now, Markel Curtis actually requested a competency hearing as well, and according to court documents, a judge granted this motion and scheduled a hearing for March 23rd. And to that, Linda's family said, quote, "We were not shocked Markel filed for a competency hearing. We feel since they were denied separate trials, this is a maneuver by the defense team to delay processes and have separate trials. No matter how many trials they have, the evidence will not change and we will continue to fight for justice." End quote. On March 30th, 2023, according to the lensnola.org, DA Jason Williams did charge the teens as adults with second-degree murder, and if found guilty, could face mandatory life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. This was a very controversial move for DA Williams because you see, when Williams was campaigning for his position as district attorney, he apparently made promises to keep all cases involving minors in juvenile court. He always included research in his speeches, highlighting that the brain development for the youth indicated how they were more prone to fall for peer pressure and engage in things they shouldn't, not realizing the consequences they'd have to face based on their choices. However, in the case of Linda FRICKEY, all those promises he made didn't apply, and he got some backlash for that. Although prosecutors never introduced the idea that the teens murdered Linda with the intention to kill her, Williams was still charging them with second-degree murder when generally for a murder charge, you have to prove that there was intent. Legal scholars, attorneys, and advocates all disagreeing with said decision of the DA. And to support their argument, it was emphasized that none of the teens didn't have any deadly weapons with them, and 2 of the girls present didn't have any physical interaction with Linda at all. Also, surveillance video shows that Markel was only in the car for a few seconds and jumped right out of the vehicle before the other teens took off, resulting in Linda's demise. Prosecutors decided to charge the teens using the felony murder rule, where under Louisiana law, someone could still be charged with second-degree murder even if they had no intent to kill or inflict great bodily harm. if the results of their felony crime leads to a person being killed, which in this case, Linda was killed in the midst of a robbery committed by the teens. The whole concept of felony murder had been harshly criticized by legal scholars and progressive groups, in which DA Williams was once part of. Felony murder is said to have resulted in harsh prison sentences, and it would mainly impact people of color and women. And applying it to minors will only contradict the scientific evidence that they are unable to consider consequential outcomes. However, as you can imagine, Linda's family didn't care about the scientific nothing. They made their desires very clear for the teens to be prosecuted as adults and face the harshest punishment possible. And it seems to me that DA Williams agreed, as he defended himself, arguing that in the juvenile system, the harshest penalty would have been for them to be incarcerated until their 21st birthdays, which just isn't sufficient enough of a punishment for the crime that was committed. Williams stated, quote, "I know that there are some in this community who will absolutely say that I am wrong for charging these 4 young people as adults. I say it was wrong of them to prey on and kill one of our elders. It was wrong to ignore her cries for mercy, which are embedded in the neighbors' minds and hearts and ears who are out there at that crime scene. It was wrong to take her life," end quote. Well, April came and went, and the trial date was pushed back, infuriating Linda's loved ones and leaving them on edge. Initially, it was going to be pushed all the way back to March of next year, 2024, but the Louisiana Supreme Court said the March 2024 date was an abuse of discretion. So the date was pushed up to November 20th of this year. And remember, I told you how one of the teens, Lenira, was sent to a mental health hospital for 60 days and had a competency hearing she had to attend after being excused from the original April 3rd trial date. Well, at the hearing on May 25th, she was found competent to stand trial. The hospital she was staying at actually requested for her to be transferred back to the Juvenile Justice Intervention Center. Judge Kimya Holmes also found her codees competent to stand trial as well. November 20th came, and the 3 teenage girls involved, Markel, Lenira, and Brianna, all pled guilty to reduced charges of attempted manslaughter ahead of the trial, and were sentenced to 20 years each with a minimum of 15 years.
Mike McDaniel was in criminal court all morning and joins us now with those details. Mike.
Hey there, Lily. Family members of Linda FRICKEY told me they were pretty much surprised by these plea deals, but that they are very happy that these 3 teens have now finally admitted their guilt in this case. 17-year-old Brianna Baker, 16-year-old Lenira Theophile, and Markel Curtis all pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of attempted manslaughter and were sentenced to 20 years. Now, they will be given credit for time served since this crime initially happened, and they will be held in juvenile detention until they become adults. They were initially charged as adults with second-degree murder and faced a life sentence. A 4th defendant in this case, 18-year-old John Honore, did not make a plea deal, so he will go to trial. 73-year-old FRICKEY was killed more than a year and a half ago in March of 2022 when prosecutors say the teens carjacked her and then dragged her with their own SUV. That violent carjacking, as you mentioned, was caught on surveillance video, which helped authorities track down these suspects. Some of the parents even were the ones who turned them in. After the pleas for the 3 girls were accepted in court, all 3 apologized to the FRICKEY family and asked for forgiveness. FRICKEY's sister-in-law even gave a victim's impact statement telling the teens to reflect on actions while they're serving their time in prison and thank them for their pleas.
I think they really were sincere in their apology, and we appreciate that they did admit their guilt, accept their punishment, and hopefully as time goes on everyone can heal.
Happening right now, potential jurors are up in the courtroom as the judge, the prosecution, and the defense all come together and decide which ones will be put in place for the trial of John Honore. No word on when that may begin or how long this process may take.
John Honor, who is now 18 years old, was still facing a charge of second-degree murder that potentially held a life sentence. He surprisingly pled not guilty to the charge, and I think that was a pretty arrogant decision of he and his attorney. DA Williams said the strategy behind it was simple because if he pled guilty, then he would be going to prison for life indefinitely. But if he pled not guilty, it gave his attorney a chance to find holes in the prosecution's argument. His court date was set by the judge for the following Monday, November 27th, 2023. According to Yahoo News, two of the girls who pled guilty, Brenaya and Markel, humbly offered an apology to Linda's family and asked them for forgiveness. Brenaya said through tears how they never set out to kill Linda and hoped that the family could forgive her. Markel read from a statement she wrote and said, her participation in Linda's murder was the worst decision of her life, and she will spend the rest of her life making up for it. She said she wished she could go back and change the outcome. She said Linda seemed like such a nice lady. Lenira didn't speak, but instead her attorney spoke for her and offered prayers and condolences to the family. After the sentencing, Linda's sister Jenny was standing outside of the court and spoke to reporters. She said she felt relief after the hearing. She said, quote, when they were saying they were sorry, I'm sure they were because you go back, hindsight, a lot of times you are sorry for the actions you completed. And unfortunately, they did it and they have to serve the time, end quote. Linda's sister-in-law, Kathy Richards, says she thinks they were really sincere in their apology and she appreciated that they did admit their guilt and accept their punishment, and hopefully as time goes on, everyone can heal. However, when it came to 18-year-old John Honor, she felt as though he deserved no mercy and wanted to see him get the maximum punishment. 1 week later, November 27th came, and John Honor went to trial. Ahead of the trial, he had asked prosecutors to allow him to plead guilty to manslaughter with a 40-year sentence, but that was denied. During opening arguments, his attorney, William Boggs, turned to the jurors and acknowledged that yes, John did play main character in Linda's death. However, he argued that John did not have the intention to kill Linda, so while he may be charged with second-degree murder, he does not deserve the automatic life sentence that comes with it. It took the jurors about 4 hours of deliberation before they came back into the courtroom and announced that their verdict for John was guilty. Although found guilty, he won't be sentenced until January 12, 2024. John's attorney stated, quote, I would like to express my grief and condolences to the Frickeys and my disappointment that a disadvantaged child will be sent to Angola for the rest of his life. I wish the district attorney would have allowed John to take responsibility with a sentence of 40 years, end quote. Now, according to NOLA.com, being that John was technically a minor at the time of the crime, he would be found eligible for parole after serving 25 years. The guilty verdict did provide some relief for Linda's loved ones, knowing that a harsh punishment may very well be bestowed upon John. The teenagers weren't the only ones having to face the music, as Linda's husband, Ricky, actually sued the parents of all the teenagers involved. The lawsuit was originally filed on March 21st of this year, but it was postponed until after the case ended. The New Orleans Parish Civil District Court is seeking over $50,000 for wrongful death, loss of income, and emotional suffering. He feels like the parents need to be held responsible for what their children did to Linda as well. So here's what I'm thinking and feeling at this time about everything. First of all, I'm a mom of teenage children, 2 of them exactly. And I teach my children to be accountable for themselves, whether they like it or not, because regardless of the brain not developed until yada, 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 these teens, they know what's right and what's wrong. And in this case, these teens knew exactly what they were doing, especially John, and I'll indulge more on that over on my membership. But anyways, these teenagers plotted on this elderly woman. They saw that she may have been an easy target due to being older, and then they pounced on her. You know, if anything, these kids deserve every second the punishment that they receive. They picked on someone they thought would be weak enough and easy enough to catch as prey. And the argument of intent blows me, because most people know it's not about the intention, it's about the way it landed. And these kids landed their incompetent tails right in jail. I'm looking forward to hearing what John's sentencing will be come January. Rest in peace to the beautiful Linda Josephine Frickey. I hate that your life ended so tragically and your family has to mourn your death with such harsh memories. But I pray that you know that you will never be forgotten. Members, don't go anywhere. Now here's some bullshit about this story. The little boy John, the ringleader, he already had a previous violent charge against him where he was charged as an adult in the criminal district court with 2 other co-Ds who had nothing to do with Linda's death, but they were also charged as adults in a whole other carjacking back in 2020 when John was just 15 years old. The thing is, the charges were dropped just 1 year later in 2021 by DA Jason Williams' office. So you see what I'm saying, where I'm like, listen, even John knew better because he already did this before and he was locked up for this before. But the charges were dropped the following year. And so I think that's why DA Jason Williams was standing on business this time, because it's like, maybe not he per se, but his office, they already let him slide the first time. So let me explain further. At the time in June of 2020, the former district attorney Leon Canizaro, his office was the one who charged John and his co-Ds, Aaliyah Thompson, who was 17 at the time, and Miguel Leon Jr., who was also 17, for the carjacking. But then DA Jason Williams was sworn in as the Orleans Parish DA in January of 2021. And the court records showed that his office dropped the prosecution against all 3 delinquents 2 months after the carjacking on March 10th, 2021. The court records showed that John was ordered to home confinement and later incarcerated at the Orleans Juvenile Justice Center while awaiting prosecution. He was ordered freed from confinement after Jason Williams' office told the court it was dropping the case, and they told the news station Fox 8 that the victim of the carjacking at the time was actually related to one of the defendants. Doesn't specify which defendant, but the victim was related to one of them, and the family members requested that the prosecution would drop the case. So they did. First of all, correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, even if and when there's a request for charges to be dropped from a crime, the prosecution can still go on and press charges anyway. So why not punish John to the fullest extent for a 15-year-old at that time? Because all that did was encourage the little turd to go ahead and think it was okay to do that shit again. And maybe Miss Linda would have still been alive today had John been handled as he should have been. And that's why I say I think DA Jason Williams was standing on business so hard this time. Because it's like, you already got a second chance. And this time you actually killed somebody, And when I learned of this information, it made me so mad, because he should have never gotten another chance to make anyone a victim again. In my opinion, it's beyond the brain not being developed and all that. Teens know right from wrong, and he comes off very extremely arrogant. He really participated in bringing grief and pain to a relative, whether it was his own or his co-Ds. You know what I mean? Like, someone who had a heart would have at least been like, yo, what you mean you want me to violate your family member? Or if it was their own, not even think about trying to bring harm to their own family member. You know what I'm saying? That shit is wicked. But anyways, once again, rest in peace to Linda, and my deepest condolences to her family.